What's up, everybody? Back here with another video for you today. I planned on originally doing a collection update, which is a couple of the things that you see right above my hand here, but I wound up not getting like 4 things that were supposed to all come in. I kind of figured they'd be here by now. It's been like 2 weeks, and I don't know where 20 bucks spin is out of, but it's whatever. They'll come in hopefully this week sometime, so next week I will be able to have a video up for you of the update, and then after that I will be hopping on this, I hope. So I realized it's been about 2 months since I did a installment of 5 underrated metal records. So today we're going for it, but we're doing it a little differently. This is exclusively going to be stuff that I would consider to be classic metal records, stuff that, you know, might be underrated in a band's catalog, or people gloss over it, or you just don't care. You know, somebody you hear 20 years ago, you're like, this is okay, and then you never revisit it because of that experience. So I'm going to try to shed light on some records that I believe deserve to get a little bit more attention than they do. It is the morning, no beer, just some water with like a flavor packet. First thing we're listening to in the background is actually the first thing on here. This is this amazing Norwegian album, Tragedies, by the band Funeral. This is a 2023 Season of Mist repress. I picked this up on pre-order. Really cool, nice looking digipack, even though I kind of hate the format itself. But this is what's going on in the background, and it's also the first thing. This is a classic, brilliant, super early Funeral Doom album from 1995. Let's think of what was going on in 1995 that had this kind of style. I mean, I guess you could probably point out My Dying Bride. You could definitely point out the first couple of Anathema albums. Mostly just Peaceville bands. There's a handful of other bands that were maintaining a similar level of obscurity to what this band was at in the day. But later on, I think this band gained substantially more notoriety. But at the time, this album did not get the love it deserves, from what I understand. And I think that cover might have something to do with it. It's about as corny as they come, and I kind of like that about it. And it is a brilliant album. So this band is a constant user of the phenomenon now that I have been made well aware of the Beauty and the Beast style of vocal. And you know that kind of phenomenon of which you have been hearing something and it's been around you like most of the time, and somebody finally points it out to you and you never noticed it before, and then you start noticing it literally everywhere. And that's kind of that term of the Beauty and the Beast vocals, which is apparently a big thing in the goth metal community, which I'm vaguely familiar with. I know a little bit of it, mostly all just entry-level bands as far as the goth stuff goes. And this band kind of mixes that in with an early Funeral Doom, a really well put together death doom, and it's absolutely somber. It's trudgingly slow, absolutely snail-paced doom metal with tons of, you know, your classical guitars. The female vocals are super mournful, and she's got to be singing in Norwegian because I have no clue what she is saying ever, like pretty much ever on the whole record. I hear her singing this like mournful, somber cry of a vocal, and I have no clue what she's saying, so it's got to be in another language. But it really fits well with the atmosphere. I mean, the addition of the classical guitar as well is an enormous atmospheric builder for this band. It creates a really nice and somber auditory, I guess, kind of an escape from reality, because this band is really engulfing. Particularly on this record, they went along and did a little bit more of a straight up goth doom as time went along, which I have one of those albums as well. But listening to this, I seriously understand where Mournful Congregation got their sound from. That this must have been an enormous influence on them, especially records like The Nomad of Creation and things like that. So if you have not listened to this Funeral album before, I would highly recommend it. Next is a new wave of British heavy metal album from, I believe this came out in 1984, which I guess, is, if you're going to be a dweeb about it, is technically too late to be considered new wave of British heavy metal, but I'm going to call it that anyway. This is Savage's Loose and Lethal. This might be 83. It's one of the two. This reissue doesn't say. This is a Crescendo Records 2008 press. Actually, it might be a bootleg of the Crescendo Records 2008 press. I really don't know. I really don't care, to be honest with you. This is a killer record. This is Riff-O-Rama. This is the kind of heavy metal that you would hear and you'd be like, this would make a really good soundtrack song. You know, there's a couple songs on here that I was thinking that as I was listening to it, which is like songs Cry Wolf and Berlin are like the two songs that I really thought like I could picture something happening in a movie with this happening. You know, like you're watching like a movie, right, and there's like a high school scene and there's like a cool dude getting out of like a Trans Am in the 80s, you know, mullet, denim jacket, whatever, and he's just like walking up like a sidewalk to like his high school or something to continue on the movie. It's kind of like, that's what I picture a lot when this is happening, and I think that's a really big part of what I like about this record. You know, I kind of really enjoy that fun rock and roll AC/DC influence style that a lot of these bands seem to continually put into their music in this era, and it fits well. I mean, that's the stuff, even though that, you know, AC/DC's debut was only a couple of years before the new wave of British heavy metal really hit. What was the first AC/DC album? 75, 76, I think? I don't know, but it's crazy how much of an impact a band can have like that. My one only complaint really about this would be the production. And it's not a huge complaint. It's raw, and I get it. It makes sense as to why it sounds so raw, but it's almost distracting at some points. It has this weird, like, messed up tape effect. It might be this pressing, and if this is a bootleg, that wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. So I'm not 100% sure, but if you like your old school traditional metal, you like stuff that's classic, that doesn't get talked about, Savage's Loose and Lethal is mandatory as far as I'm concerned. Next, we're going to talk about one of my favorite death metal albums ever. This is Broken Hope's album, Swamped in Gore. First off, get a load of that. That's an album cover right there. That's a one of the corniest and worst death metal album covers ever, and I absolutely love it. I didn't want a pressing that didn't have that, because as corny and stupid as this album cover is, I don't like the reissue cover at all, and I feel like 80% of the charm of brutal death metal is how ridiculously campy it is, especially the early stuff. This album in particular, though, is so catchy. It's Riff-O-Rama. It's like a little bit more mid-paced Suffocation. You know how Suffocation has a really dynamic and intense feel? This is a really trudging early brutal death metal style. It kind of doesn't get into as much of the blasting into, you know, like your Pierced from Within and Breeding the Swan and Effigies and Human Waste kind of has. It creeps around a little more, which it gets blasty, it gets quick, and it gets really heavy and aggressive, but I feel like that's in that level of intensity isn't maintained to the same amount as like Suffocation is, because honestly, stylistically, that's the closest comparison I would say to this band. And if you haven't heard this and you do like old school brutal death metal, you gotta have it. Songs like Swamped in Gore are just so much of an earworm. Everything on this record is kind of like that. I mean, Devourer of Souls, Gore Hog is great. Goblin the Guts is hilarious. Claustrophobic Agnostic Dead is just a crazy ender. Everything about this is a killer record. It's incredibly replayable. I have so much fun every time I listen to it, and every time I do, I'm walking around going swamp, go for the next like 3 days. It literally happens every time. So if you want to walk around making stupid noises around your house, go listen to Swamped in Gore by Broken Hope. I also like The Bowels of Repugnance, but Swamped in Gore has hit me substantially harder. Next, this is one, I don't know what the deal is as to why people don't know this, but this is In Times Before the Light by Covenant. I feel like a decent amount of people do know this album, but it's not as beloved as I believe it should be. So this is a Norwegian black metal project, at this point at least. Earlier on, or later on I should say, they got really bad. They turned into a terrible goth, industrial, weird, nasty, awful synth pop garbage. I don't know. I don't know a lot about that style, but I hate it. I cannot stand a lot of that stuff. But this is an amazing melodic black metal album. It's tinged with some symphonic stuff. You could make an argument for it, but it's symphonic in the way a keyboardy melodic black metal band is. You know, like, it's definitely an idea in there, but it's not as symphonic as you would maybe say Lymphonic Art. I would compare this more to Stormblast and For All Tid era of Dimmu Borgir. It's really great. It's atmospherically very similar to that, particularly Stormblast. I don't know if it's suggestive by the aesthetic, but this is killer. And members of this band were in Dimmu Borgir at certain points. I don't think there's any association in our current lineup that we have for Dimmu, but it's a really good record. It's got this swirling atmosphere. The production is really grating. It's got a really grainy sound to it, which I kind of like, but it kind of doesn't have the majestic swirling atmosphere of, you know, your early Emperors or your anything like that. It's just a lot more sandpaper on the ears than something like that. It's not as pretty sounding. It kind of has a little bit more of a rough grimness to it. I don't know, maybe I'm hearing it weird. I do have hearing damage, so that definitely could be a part of it, but I really do enjoy that production style with this. I like that there's no garbage going on. They just go like right into the tunes on here, which I appreciate, because a band with this level of musical ability tend to fart around doing weird stuff, adding extra, you know, interludes, adding 7-minute intros. I don't need that. I promise you will not be missed 7-minute intros. But nonetheless, man, it's a fun record. It's really enjoyable. It's really replayable, and if you have not listened to this Covenant album, In Times Before the Light, it got reissued on Cosmic Key Creations in 2020, which is one of the best labels that is currently reissuing things, though they're on these weird European jewel cases. It's a bit odd, but I do like it a lot, and I think this is a great record. Go listen to Covenant. Alright, this is the last one, and this is probably the least underrated of all the ones I'm going to talk about, but I think it gets too much crap, and I don't want to hear that. This is Extreme Aggression by Creator. I absolutely love this album. This is my favorite Creator album, and I hear a lot of people say that this is where they started plummeting downhill, you know, falling out of the German thrash stratosphere, impacting the ground, started getting really bad. I don't know why that's so much of the case. I guess it makes sense listening to the first 3 or 4 albums that came before this. I'm trying to remember the exact chronology in my head. I have a bunch of them, but then right after this came Coma of Souls, and this is 1989, right? This is when thrash is at its, like, the tail end of its peak. It's gonna start getting bad after this. 89 is kind of when the grunge debuts began to happen, and but anyway, this is an amazing album. It's really intense. Yes, the production's a lot cleaner. Yes, the guitar playing is a lot better. It's not as sloppy, but it doesn't have that raw aggression that, you know, Flag of Hate and all those other albums, Obsessed by Cruelty, Pleasure to Kill, those albums would have. But I don't know, man. It maintains the Creator style. It maintains the Creator feel without being so raw, without having such a sloppiness to the musicianship. I think this is refined Creator. This is how Creator aged. This is well-aged Creator. You know, this is your imperial stout that's been sitting in a bourbon barrel, as opposed to you just drank it out of the bright tank. If that makes any sense to you. This is refined, this is aged, it's perfectly placed, it's thought out, and it is properly manufactured by the band, as opposed to a product of their lack of funding or something like that, like a lot of bands would be. The case for this, I think, is incredibly strong. My favorite song on here, still to this day, has to be Betrayer. That's the song that got me into Creator, and that is the thing that really sold me on the more angry and aggressive style of thrash. This band and Sodom really did it for me. The first song, Extreme Aggression, is a great open. No Reason to Exist is a good song. Love Us or Hate Us is like a staple of Creator as far as I'm concerned. Stream of Consciousness is a classic track. Same thing with Some Pain Will Last. Betrayer, obviously the absolute banger of the record as far as I'm concerned. Don't Trust is a great song. Bringer of Torture and Fatal Energy is a great way to kind of end the record out. The band just is relentless the whole time. I guess the dynamics of their songwriting is kind of starting to pick up here, and I find it very interesting, very listenable. My friends all call this extreme indigestion when we were younger, just because that's what my buddy heard when he heard Extreme Aggression's chorus. So yeah, Creator's Extreme Indigestion, absolutely top tier thrash record. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I will be back with a collection update next week. I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin tomorrow. Actually, if as you're watching this, it'll be later today. So I'll be stopping at a record store, which is a terrible decision, but I'm doing it anyway. I've been good about money lately, so I'm going to go to a record store and be really bad about it. But I hope y'all enjoyed this. Tell me if you guys think these records are worth more hype than they get. Let me know what's going on. I'll catch y'all later. Keep it greasy.